Hello everyone, today's story is on Tina Lasonya Brown, who was sentenced to death in Florida for killing 19-year-old Audreanna Zimmerman. Her co-defendants, Heather Lee and daughter Britnee, received life and 25 years in prison. As you are watching this video, I would like you to think and comment below if you think Tina, Heather, and Britnee all deserve the same sentence or not.
Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Tina Lasonya Brown was born on July 19, 1970, to Lily and Willie Coleman Sr. Lily and William were teenagers when they married in North Chicago. Shortly after getting married, they had Tina, and 11 months after Tina was born, her brother Willie Coleman Jr. was born. Some say that Willie Sr. and Lily were hardworking, but given their age, they were more into partying than taking care of Tina and Willie Jr. They were often left at home alone for long periods of time, and if they weren't at home by themselves, they were dropped off at their uncle's house. Tina's uncle recounted that they would be dropped off on Friday night and they would be picked up on Sunday night. Although there was not much of an age gap, Tina took the mother role and would cook meals for her and Willie Jr. She would get him dressed for school, help him with homework, and walk him to and from school. As time passed, Willie Sr. did have a steady job, but many people, including family members, said that he was in a gang and truly made most of his money by selling drugs out of his house. Tina claims that Willie Sr. ran the gang-related drug operation out of their house. In mid-1982, Willie Sr. assaulted Lily very bad. Lily was no longer able to take her way of living, so she divorced Willie Sr., moved out of the house, and never looked back. She left and made no effort to keep contact with Tina nor Willie Jr. Willie Sr. ended up filing for full custody because of Lily's actions, and he won. Willie Sr. continued selling drugs out of his home to make money, but since Lily wasn't around to please him anymore, he started to sexually assault Tina instead. Instead of the normal relationship they should have had, their relationship turned into a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. Just like her mother, Tina could no longer take it at her father's house, so she went to live with her paternal grandmother. Tina felt comfortable with her grandmother after some time, and she ended up opening up to her about being sexually assaulted by Willie Sr. Instead of supporting Tina and taking her anger out on the man who hurt her, Tina's grandmother got mad at her and kicked her out of the house. She claimed her son would never do such a thing and told Tina to never come back. Having nowhere to go, Tina returned to her father's house and the assaults continued. Willie Jr., although not sexually assaulted, would be physically assaulted by his father, especially when he was high. Willie Sr. ended up getting married again against his family's wishes to a woman named Melinda. Tina was able to get a reprieve from being sexually assaulted because Willie Sr. was heavily into the promiscuous, drug-using Melinda. Melinda was a frequent drinker and had no issues sleeping with other men. Tina and Willie Jr. would recount the many days and nights Willie Sr. and Melinda would lock themselves in a bedroom for hours just using. When they would lock themselves in a bedroom, Tina and Willie Jr. would leave the house to wander the streets. Unfortunately, they lived in a bad neighborhood where they were surrounded by gangs and violence. The more Willie Sr. and Melinda used and drank, the more dysfunctional the family became and the more assaults occurred. Tina was initially happy Melinda was in the picture because she was able to remove Willie Sr.'s eyes away from wanting her, but their relationship quickly turned sour when Melinda introduced her to drugs and demanded she have intercourse with men for money. After some years, Tina's father was now being investigated by the FBI for his gang-related operations. He was arrested and spent a year in prison for his involvement in the organization. After Willie Sr. got locked up, Tina went to live with her estranged mother for a short period of time. The stay was short-lived because Tina had a hard time following a structured way of living with strict rules. Lily was getting tired and made no efforts to keep Tina on the right track, so she did just like Tina's grandmother did and kicked her out of the house. After leaving her mother's house, Tina moved in with an aunt. Tina's upbringing was so inconsistent and dysfunctional that she struggled in school and attended 4 different schools in 4 years. She eventually dropped out of high school, but after a year, she changed her mind and returned to finish her senior year. She got her diploma, but the diploma did not change what she witnessed growing up or the young woman it turned her into. With no place to live and hooked on illegal substances because of the evil stepmother Melinda, Tina moved into a drug house. While staying at the drug house, she met a fellow user by the name of Greg Miller. Their relationship was volatile, but they remained together no matter what issues they were facing. Tina got pregnant for the first time, and by the time her first child was born, they were born with cocaine in their system. Tina got pregnant 2 more times, but it wasn't until after her 3rd pregnancy that Tina broke up with Greg and entered herself into a rehab facility. Tina was still pregnant when she entered the rehab facility, and she ended up giving birth to her 3rd child, Britnee Miller, inside of the facility. Instead of leaving her children in the foster care system, Tina agreed to a treatment plan, and part of the plan was to allow her mother Lily to adopt her 1st and 2nd child. Tina finished her treatment and was able to keep custody of her 3rd child, Britnee Miller. Tina tried her best to be a good mother and was clean from all substances for a total of 4 years. Tina was feeling good and ended up meeting and marrying a new man. After getting married, though, her husband got busted for selling drugs and got locked up. Tina began working as a bartender, and she soon met another man that caught her attention. This new man, however, was also a drug dealer. She continued to stay clean despite dating this drug-dealing boyfriend for 2 years. Tina was being assaulted by her boyfriend and had called the cops on him multiple times. She was only free from this boyfriend when he was locked up for selling drugs. Tina was unable to manage life, though. Her boyfriend was the breadwinner, and she depended on him for the cost of living and more. Tina became depressed, got multiple speeding tickets, and being that she was unable to pay, she lost her driver's license. With no money and desperate, Tina began passing bad checks, but she was caught and criminally charged for that. Tina finally turned to exotic dancing in order to pay her bills, and that is when she relapsed. Tina used for another 9 years, and during those 9 years, she worked the streets, lived on the streets, and continued writing bad checks. After those 9 years, she got busted for writing bad checks again, and the court ordered her to a treatment program. It was 2005, and Tina was 35 years old when she graduated from the program. After graduating, she tried to make an honest living, and she was hired as an assistant manager of a catering company. She worked very hard, and her job noticed her efforts as well. Tina was promoted to a manager, and she kept this position for another 4 years. Tina ended up meeting a 4th man, but many around her said that this relationship was a positive one. She was doing so well that her sons were able to have visitation days scheduled with her at her place. Tina was still in contact and close with her brother Willie Jr., who also happened to be in a relationship. One day, Tina found out that her boyfriend was sleeping with her brother Willie's girlfriend, so she broke up with him. The breakup caused her to spiral into a depression again. She quit her good-paying job, started writing bad checks, and relapsed again. This relapse did not last as long as her last relapse, and she was able to get clean in about a month. In the summer of 2009, Tina decided to feel good about herself and do something with her life, so she enrolled in online college classes and moved to Pensacola, Florida. She got a new job working at a Waffle House, but she wasn't making enough money to sustain living comfortably. She was living in a mobile home park with her daughter Britnee Miller and was having a hard time. It was nearing Thanksgiving 2009, and she was struggling so much that she was unable to afford a nice Thanksgiving dinner with her family. She relapsed, quit her job, and started engaging in sexual activity to earn money for drugs. Tina didn't go for random men, though. Instead, she was sleeping with her neighbor Heather Lee's husband. Tina and Britnee were initially very close with their neighbors Heather Lee and 19-year-old Audreanna Zimmerman, but the women often had arguments that would lead into assaulting one another. Most of the arguments were about men. On one occasion, Tina had accused Audreanna of damaging her tires before, and Audreanna accused Tina of retaliating and breaking a window in her car. Tina also got Audriana's boyfriend arrested and reported them to CPS for not being good parents and not providing the appropriate care a parent should be able to. Heather tried to be peacemaker on multiple occasions, but her efforts always failed. Britnee would often stick up for Tina and get into physical altercations with Audreanna herself. With all of the drama that was going on between the women, Tina was sleeping with Heather's husband, and Audreanna, who was in a relationship, was sleeping with Britnee's boyfriend. When Britnee found out that Audreanna was sleeping with her man, She tried assaulting her, but Audreanna defended herself with a stun gun. Britnee gave up temporarily and went back to her trailer. When she was able to talk to her mother Tina, she let her know that she was going to get Audreanna, payback for what she did. Tina, wanting to protect Britnee, told her, "Don't worry, I will take care of it." Days later, things still did not die down, and Tina and Britnee still had Audreanna on their minds. On March 24th, 2010, Tina invited Audreanna to her trailer to make up and rekindle their friendship. It was all a lie, though. Tina had no intentions of rebuilding any friendship. Before Audreanna made her way to Tina's trailer, Tina, Britnee, and Britnee's friend were inside. Tina was teaching them how to properly use a stun gun. When Britnee finally got comfortable with the stun gun, she pulled her friend to the side and said, "We're fixing to kill Audreanna." Audreanna made her way to Tina's trailer at about 9 o'clock at night. Within minutes of her arriving, Tina used the stun gun on Audreanna multiple times. Even after Audreanna fell to the floor, unable to control her muscles, Tina continued using the stun gun on her. Audreanna did try yelling out for help, but no one came. Tina then pulled Audreanna into the bathroom and, in an attempt to muffle her yelling, Tina stuffed her mouth with a sock. After quieting her down, Audreanna was carried into the trunk of Tina's car. Tina, Britnee, and Heather all got into Tina's car and drove off. Tina drove to the woods that was about 1.5 miles away from the trailer park she lived at. Tina parked, got out of the car, walked to the trunk, opened it, and pulled Audreanna out. Audreanna immediately tried to run away and flee, but she tripped and fell due to it being so dark outside that she was unable to clearly see the ground. Britnee and Tina caught up with Audreanna, wrestled her to the ground, and used multiple weapons to assault her. Fists, a crowbar, and a stun gun, just to name a few. While Britnee continued assaulting Audreanna, Tina walked back to the car, grabbed a can of gasoline, and then pulled out a lighter from her back pocket. A conscious Audreanna was now covered in gasoline, and Tina used the lighter on her. Britnee was so excited by what was happening, she started jumping up and down and chanting, "Burn! Burn!" The three women left and drove back home to their trailer park, assuming that Audreanna would for sure have died. On the car ride home, though, Britnee got scared and said, "Mom, you've got to turn around. I left my shoes and the taser." Tina ignored Britnee's pleas and refused to drive back to the scene of the crime. As the women were driving away, a man by the name of Terrence Hendrick heard a faint female voice asking for help. The crime took place about 1/3 of a mile away from his home. Terrence walked away from his home towards the voice, but it was so dark he could not see anyone. Instead of giving up, he continued searching in pitch black for the woman quietly calling out. Tina, Britnee, and Heather thought they had killed Audreanna, but little to their surprise, Audreanna was still alive and began walking slowly toward Terrence's house. She had been the woman Terrence had heard calling for help. Audreanna made her way to Terrence's house and asked him for help. While Audreanna was sitting on the front porch steps, Terrence was in shock looking at what was in front of him. Audreanna had no clothes on, a big head injury, smelled of gasoline, and her skin was pitch black. Audreanna was so charred that Terrence said he had no clue what race she was. A little before 9:30 p.m., EMT arrived at Terrence's house. They noticed that Audreanna was alive and conscious, but over 90% of her body was burned, and her jaw was either broken or dislocated. Audreanna's skin was falling apart, and her injuries were so bad that medical technicians were unable to provide any type of medical assistance. The technicians also did not have enough gauze to cover Audreanna's entire body. Every time a medical technician tried moving her, her charred skin would rub off on their gloves or equipment. Audreanna was having a very difficult time with the injuries she sustained, but she was still strong enough to let them know that Tina and Heather were responsible for doing that to her. She did initially leave Britnee's name out, but she said Tina and Heather are the ones who, quote-unquote, drug her out of the house, tased, assaulted her with a crowbar, and then set her ablaze. She gave her address and the address of the woman she mentioned. While in the ambulance and being transported to the hospital, Audreanna asked EMT to protect her little ones and questioned if she would be able to recover from her wounds. Also, it didn't matter that Britnee left her shoes and stun gun at the crime scene because Audreanna mentioned Britnee's name in the ambulance. Audreanna claimed that she thought they had made up, but Tina, Heather, and Britnee assaulted her. Audreanna was stabilized at a local hospital, and then she was transferred to the burn center at the University of South Alabama. While Audreanna was recovering in the hospital from her wounds, Tina, Britnee, and Heather made it back to Tina's trailer. Tina and Britnee removed their blood-stained clothes and put them in a garbage bag. Heather removed her blood-stained shoes and placed them in a bag. Britnee's friend, who had been there before they left to try and kill Audreanna, was still inside of the trailer and never left. Britnee told her friend that she hurt her hand after assaulting Audreanna and that all three of them put gasoline on her. Britnee's friend was not fazed by this information, and she drove with Britnee in Tina's car to the hospital so that Britnee's hand could get checked out. Britnee was released from the hospital early the next morning, but before returning home, she dumped the garbage bag full of blood-stained clothes in a dumpster, and then she started cleaning the stains that were inside of Tina's car. When Britnee arrived at her home, law enforcement was there ready to arrest her. She had no clue Tina and Heather were arrested the night before, or that Audreanna was still alive, and identified all of them as the culprits. Shortly after being locked up, the women were released from jail. While out, Tina informed her friend Pamela Valley what she, Heather, and Britnee did to Audreanna. When Tina found out Audreanna was still alive, she asked Pamela if she could finish her off in the hospital, but Pamela declined and ended up going to authorities. Tina, Britnee, and Heather weren't free for long. Audreanna unfortunately was unable to recover from her wounds and died 16 days after being admitted to the hospital. Her official cause of death was multiple thermal injuries. She died on April 9, 2010. Britnee, Heather, and Tina were arrested that same day and charged with murder. Back at the scene of the crime, police officers discovered multiple pieces of evidence, including a pair of white shoes, a stun gun that had blood on the handle, blood-stained paper, an orange, gold, a black hair weave, a crowbar, and a pool of blood. The first time Tina was arrested for assaulting Audreanna, which was the night of the attack, a police officer interviewed Tina and noticed that she was missing a large section of hair from the back of her head. It turned out that the hair weave found at the scene of the crime belonged to Tina. DNA samples were taken, and blood on the stun gun matched Tina's DNA. When trial began, many people testified against Tina, including a prison mate who told the court that Tina had confided in her and discussed the murder in detail. Tina's attorneys tried bringing up her tumultuous past and life growing up. The defense was able to get testimony from Tina's sons, her brother, her aunt, and 2 of her uncles. They also presented the testimony of a Dr. Elaine Bailey. Dr. Elaine Bailey was a psychologist that presented family photos of Tina. She also noted that Tina admitted to her on the night of the attack that she used several $100s worth of cocaine and wasn't in her right frame of mind. In response, the state prosecutors had a licensed mental health counselor by the name of Dr. John Bingham present photographs of the victim, Audreanna Zimmerman, to the court. Dr. Bingham also told the court that Tina told him she did not have as much cocaine as she had taken in the past. After interviewing Tina's family, Dr. Bailey testified that after a supplemental investigative report, she concluded that Tina suffered from repeated traumas, addictions, physical and sexual assaults, negative community influences, and exposure to violence her whole life. After talking about her neglectful parents, Dr. Bailey was quoted saying that repercussions from the repeated traumas in Tina's life extended for decades into her adulthood, but Tina was still logical and was able to think in a linear and rational way. She also concluded that Tina was not suffering from bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or any other mood disorders. Dr. Bailey said she could only diagnose Tina with being dependent on crack cocaine, but she had since stopped using because she was locked up. Dr. Bailey finished her testimony by saying Tina did not deny her involvement in the murder and that she was remorseful for her actions. Dr. Bingham took to the stand and testified that Tina did not exhibit any signs of psychosis and possessed an intelligence level in the low average range. He also claimed that although she did show extreme anger and rage, she was still able to think clearly and recognize right from wrong. He then told the court that the night Tina attacked Audreanna, she demonstrated levels of pre-planning, direction, and had goal-oriented actions. He concluded that her past had no effect on her actions when she assaulted Audreanna, and she was competent. On June 21, 2012, a jury convicted Tina of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, more of Tina's family members spoke of her and her past. This meant nothing to the jury, and on June 26, 2012, the jury recommended a death sentence by a unanimous vote. After being sentenced, Tina Tina apologized to Audrianna's family and was quoted saying that Audrianna died a horrific death, and I was one of the ones who participated in taking her life. She didn't deserve it at all. On September 28, 2012, the trial court agreed with the jury's recommendation of death, and she was sentenced to death for the murder of Audrianna. There were 3 points of significant weight that factored over the 27 points made by the defense that meant little weight in terms of how harsh her sentence should be. The 3 factors that showed great or significant weight were that 1. The murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. 2. The murder was especially heinous. And 3. The murder was committed while Audrianna was taken against her will. The 27 non-statutory mitigating circumstances were that Tina was a child of a teenage mother, both her parents left her, she lost a child due to parental neglect, her mother left her, family history of assaults, she was exposed to drugs, she suffered developmental damage due to her parents being on drugs, she was sexually assaulted by William Sr., she was betrayed by her grandmother and kicked out, experienced corruptive community influences and exposure to criminal lifestyle, she experienced chaotic moves and transitions, was assaulted as an adult, witnessed a homicide and once served as a state witness in a murder trial, she lost her parental rights, suffered from repeated trauma, suffered from addiction, suffered from long-term effects of chronic drug use on her brain, she was a productive citizen during periods of sobriety, she lived in poverty at the time of the crime, she behaved well in jail, she attended a Bible study program in jail, she exhibited good courtroom behavior, she had no possibility of parole, she showed remorse, she received a different sentence than her co-defendants, she had no history of prior criminal acts, and lastly, she was high on the night of the attack. Tina Brown is currently a Pensacola death row inmate awaiting an execution date. As for Heather Lee, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for her role in the murder of Audrianna. Tina's daughter, Britnee Miller, despite being 2 years shy of 18, was tried as an adult and was sentenced to life without parole by Judge Gary Burgosh. Thank you all for watching another episode of Death Row Executions. Let me know what you guys think of this story in the comments below. Do you think Heather and Britnee should have received the same sentence as Tina? If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're interested, you can support me on Patreon or YouTube memberships.